What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about a plugin called Dehancer. Now you may or may not have heard about it, but Dehancer is one of the best plugins out there on the marketplace to emulate film or get that nostalgic film look. Now, full disclosure, Dehancer did reach out to me to test out the plugin. In exchange, they did let me use the software for a couple months. No money did exchange hands, but if you check out this email right here, you will see that they do want a full and transparent review of the plugin, which I think is super cool. So there is no pressure for me to review in any form or fashion. They do want an honest opinion. By the end of this, if you are convinced and you like it, use the code that I'm gonna leave down below, Nerdy Camera. You'll get 10% off and I get a little kickback, and that helps me continue to make videos like this and support the channel. Obviously, I don't have a huge audience right now and I'm doing this all on my own, so any little bit helps. Buy a cup of coffee and keep me going. Okay. So before we actually get into the review, let's quickly go over what Dehancer actually is. So like I mentioned, Dehancer is a plugin and it comes in different flavors. Today we are going to be checking out the version for DaVinci Resolve because that's how I edit. But it is available for all the Adobe Suite software, and you can also check it out for Final Cut. It does come in a bunch of different flavors. We are going to be checking out the Pro version because that's the version that they gave me, but there is a light version, and then there is a bunch of different versions that they have if you want to check out just specific parts of the plugin. You can see here on the website. They also do have versions that are available for Lightroom and Lightroom Mobile. I did get a chance to use it in Lightroom Mobile, but I didn't have a great experience, so we're not going to review that part of the plugin. If you happen to get the Dehancer Pro subscription, you will get the Lightroom plugin available for it, so you can test it out yourself. Like I said, we're not going to go over that version of the workflow because my experience wasn't great, so we're going to go ahead and skip over that. Dehancer also did want me to mention that they do have an iOS version. So here you can see a quick screen grab of me using it. I did like that version when I tested it out. It is one of the better camera apps out there that emulates film. So I definitely will recommend this app. And again, if you get the Pro version of Dehancer, you'll also get the iOS app. Okay, so what is Dehancer? Dehancer is really just a digital version of the film development process. If you've ever seen or done your own film developing, you know it's a pretty lengthy process. So each one of the drop-down menus sort of walks you through that process. Once we jump into the computer, you'll know a little bit more about what I mean. One of the other things that I did want to talk about that I don't think a lot of tutorials out there explain is you can use Dehancer for some basic color grading features. Now, by no means is Dehancer meant to replace a full color grading pipeline, but when you're just starting out, it's a great place to start and learn. Okay, let's jump into the computer. All right, guys, so we are here now in DaVinci Resolve, and we are going to start to explore a little bit about what Dehancer is all about. So let me just explain what the project that I have here open and what I've prepped before we actually jump into the plugin. There's a few things that I want to go over real quick. Okay, so you see I have my normal timeline open here. This is just a regular timeline in DaVinci Resolve, and I've got a few clips open here. So the clips here in orange are a couple clips that I shot in a recent music video. So this one is just shot with a red Komodo X. This is also shot with a red Komodo X. This clip here was shot with my iPhone. This was the iPhone Pro Max, iPhone 16 Pro Max. And then this was shot with the Camp Snap Super 8. So their little Super 8 camera. Really, it's just a dash cam, so it's nothing special. It's just a little digital camera that has a terrible sensor, so it's nothing great. But the reason why I brought this in here is because I wanted to show you the power of Dehancer, that you can actually use it to pretty much do whatever you want to grade anything. And the reason why I chose this particular clip over something else like a drone or really anything else is because this particular camera is being advertised as a Super 8 camera. At least that's what it looks like. It looks like a Super 8 camera physically, and it's supposed to emulate a Super 8 camera, but as you can see here in the footage, it looks nothing like a Super 8 camera. So if I zoom out here, it's in the 16:9 aspect ratio. You can shoot in different aspect ratios. That's for a different video, but it looks nothing like a real Super 8 camera. So I wanted to show you what you could do with Dehancer to sort of emulate a old vintage camera in the film style if you had other footage and you wanted to really get that sort of old classic film look. I also have here these green clips. These are pre-colored, and I'm going to show you what these are about. These are from that same music video. These are graded using a combination of my normal color grade process and Dehancer, and I'm going to show you what that is about later on. So just forget about this for a second. We'll jump back into that in a minute. Okay, so now we're here on the color page. And like I mentioned, this first clip, these first two clips were shot with the Red Komodo X for this music video that I did. So normally what you would want to do is you would go into the effects tab over here, and I have it saved as a favorite, but if I turn off the favorites and show all, you can scroll all the way down once you've installed the plugin, and you can see down here under film emulation, it shows up as Dehancer. But then if you hit the little star, you can actually save it as a favorite, and then you don't have to go through all those plugins. You could theoretically just drop it on here, and then Dehancer will load up onto your node. But I'm going to show you a trick that I've done. I don't do that anymore. I did that obviously the first couple of times I used it. The reason why I don't do that any longer is because by default, for whatever reason, the way they built the plugin, it automatically loads up in the Rec 709 source mode here. And it also has a few things already enabled. So you can see that it's already sort of changed the way this clip looks. So if I just disable the node, you can see it goes from the log profile to whatever this default version of the Dehancer node is. So that already kind of annoys me because then you have to go back here and sort of zero everything out. So what I have done is, I'll reset this node. What I've done is I've created a power grade. And if you're not familiar with power grades, it's basically just a grade that you can save here that will be available in any project. So you've got stills that are available in your project here that you can save in this particular project. But if you go to a power grade, these are available in every project that you have. So these are all a bunch of different versions that I've created throughout different projects that I've worked on. I've created one that's called Dehancer, and if I now drop this on to the node, you can see that nothing's actually happened. So again, I'll disable the plugin, nothing's happened. And if we go, let me turn this off so we get a little bit more room. If we go over here back to the effects tab, you'll notice that it does not say Rec 709 and everything is zeroed out here. So what I did was I dropped the Dehancer node on there, I zeroed everything out, and then I created the power grade node. So I recommend doing that because it just makes it a little bit easier. Then you can make sure that you're completely clean when you're using the Dehancer node. Now, there are a couple ways that you can add the Dehancer node to your node tree. Obviously, I'm just using it on a single node here. There is no right or wrong way to do this. There are best practices, and you can talk to and speak to different people and their workflows depending on how they particularly work in the way that they color grade. I'm of the mindset that, again, there's no right or wrong way to do it. There's a million ways to do things. So you can just do it this way where you just drop it on one node and you can do everything within this node. And if you want, you can add a bunch of nodes after and do a whole bunch of stuff after. You can add a bunch of nodes before, and then you can then add Dehancer on at the end of your chain. It's really up to you and how you want to work. I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. Again, your project could call for a different version or a different way of working. It could call for a different workflow. If you're in a professional setting, that project could call for a different workflow. If you're a traditional colorist, obviously you're going to have your set workflow. If you follow a tutorial from a traditional colorist, you're going to follow that workflow. I'll get into what my normal workflow looks like. The node tree is pretty big, and I have reasons for that. And I'm not going to go into all the reasons for that in this particular video, but I use a combination of that plus Dehancer in this particular music video when I colored it. But I've also used it without it. So again, it's what the project calls for and what you're comfortable with. So yeah, take it for what you will. My advice is just experiment. So right now we're just going to use one node and we're going to go right at it. One thing I will note, there's a lot of tutorials out there on how to use color space transforms. You should read up on it because it is really powerful. The Dehancer node sort of does that for you, so you don't have to do a color space transform, especially if you're working from log and you're going into a Rec 709 format, or you're basically transforming the color space. But again, Dehancer does that for you when you choose this camera source, and we're going to go into that right now. So you don't have to necessarily do that ahead of time. But again, if you have a workflow that does that, try it out, see if it works for you. If not, you can just use this one node and it will do it for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. So really quick, before we jump right into all of what everything does in this tab, I am going to hold the Option key and I'm going to click this little caret or this down arrow. I'm going to left mouse click it and close all of these at once. For whatever reason, again, these come set as open, and I'm not sure if that's a DaVinci problem or if that's a Dehancer issue, because some of the other DaVinci plugins are, when you drop them on a node, they come, all the menus come open. So that just might be a DaVinci problem. So it's just kind of annoying. And I've seen some other tutorials about Dehancer and other DaVinci plugins where that's also something that people get annoyed by. So anyway, just a little quick tip. One thing I will say, and this is probably one of my nitpicks about Dehancer, I wish that some of the menus were rearranged, because I think order of operation is pretty important, and there may be a reason why they do it the way they do behind the scenes of how the plugin actually works. So I can't really speak to that, but if there were a possibility of changing things around and if I had some input, I would definitely ask if they did some certain things a certain way. And we're going to go into each one of what these different drop downs do. But one of the more important drop down menus is actually down here in this monitor tab, which I haven't seen a lot of people go into in other tutorials. But if you open up this monitor tab and you go here, there's two really important checkboxes: false color and clipping indication. So these are monitoring tabs that you would get on a camera monitor when you're out in the field recording, and they behave just like that. So if I turn false color on, you'll notice that it automatically goes to false color, and you get the false color indicator here and you get the scale. And then if I turn clipping on, you won't really see it because there's nothing clipping. But if I were to just move this, if I were to move the curves, you'll start to see that we should see, well, I guess not. Well, I guess because let's do it up here. So we go to the input and we should, so there we go. Okay, so you'll start to see that this is clipping here in the red channel. So if I move this, no, we're still not really clipping. But anyway, you can see that it's clipping here in the red channel because I hit the exposure limit of the red channel. So I usually work with this on while I'm working because I think it's really important that as you're working inside this plugin, you can tell whether or not you're clipping or not, or you're too underexposed. Now, obviously, you can look at the scopes down below and you can look at your curves and all the tools inside of DaVinci or whatever software you're using. But I think this is really cool that they have this in here, and I haven't seen a lot of other tutorials out there talking about it. But it's super handy, and it would be really cool if it were up top where you start to mess with your inputs and outputs, and maybe you can turn that on ahead of time so that you it's more or less one of the first things that you do as you're working. So I'm going to leave it on right now. I'm going to reset this so we can start fresh, and let's get into it. So we can close the monitor tab. Okay, so we'll choose our camera. So again, if you're going straight to Rec 709, or if your clip already is in Rec 709, you would choose that. Same thing, Rec 20, Apple, and so on, right? So I'm going to choose camera because I know what camera I used. And one thing to note, I did talk about this in the open. Dehancer is really good about, as of right now, they're really good about updating their camera profiles. So they just as of the release of this video, they just updated 2 new Fujifilm camera profiles. And if you go into options and you click this check profiles button, this box will come up here and it'll automatically download whatever camera profiles are available. It goes right to their servers and pulls the latest profiles. So that's good to know. They send out an email letting you know what profiles are available. If there's any new film profiles, it'll download those as well. So it's really cool. It automatically does it. You don't have to do anything. It's all through the back end. Obviously, if you're offline, you're not going to get it. So just keep that in mind. So we are going to go to Red, and we're going to go to Komodo X. And there's only one profile here, and it's the IPP2 color space or format. So right off the bat, this is what it would look like if we were just doing a color space transform, more or less. And you can see right away that it looks really good. We're already in the right color space. The colors look vibrant. It looks like it should right off the bat, and I haven't even done anything. If I look at my scopes, they look good. Nothing's clipping. Again, I have that monitor on so we can tell. Now, if I start to mess with the exposure compensation, we can start to see if we're clipping. And again, because I was exposed properly when I was shooting, we're not really clipping. So we're doing pretty good right now. So input is good. We're done there. I'm not really going to change anything here. If I wanted to, I would probably only mess with the exposure compensation just to bump it up just a little bit. If I wanted to change my temperature, you could change your color temperature here, but obviously we're at the beach, so I'm going to keep it pretty warm. I'm kind of feeling that. Here's your tint, so you can go more green, more magenta. And obviously you can do this in additional nodes, or you can do this in additional layers inside of Premiere, with different effects in Premiere, and if you're in Final Cut, so you don't have to do this inside of Dehancer, but it's all here in Dehancer, which is cool. I don't ever really mess with defringe. I never really have to. So we'll keep it there. I think it's looking pretty good. And then we're going to go to film. So here's where it starts to get fun, obviously. So first thing you need to do is enable the film. So by default, it's picking this Kodak Vision stock. I'm going to go ahead and click enable, and you'll see automatically that it's going to change. This look, I'm not really into. Obviously you can go through all of the film stock one by one and see. We're not going to do that today because it's going to take forever. The couple that I'm really into, that I've seen that I like, are the CineStill 50D. I really like. It's kind of washed out, which is kind of cool. I like the CineStill 800T. Usually this one's a little bit too washed out or too desaturated for my taste for this particular clip. And then I'll show you the portrait. The Kodak portraits are really nice. Usually those are usually really nice. And then Kodak Gold is usually really nice. So this is pretty good. And obviously if we turn this off and on, you can see how it's changing the tone. I'm going to go back to that CineStill because I like that one the best so far. All right. And then here you can push and pull and this is based off of old school film development. when you're doing the push and pull process. And that's sort of what you're getting with that. And then here's your film developer. So again, this is all based off of the process of actually developing film. So we can boost the contrast, and you can see that it's starting to really dig into the contrast quite a bit. We can correct the gamma. We can start to really separate the colors. We can really boost the colors. You can start to see that yellow and red start to really pop. Yeah, so that really just gave it a lot more contrast. Is looking pretty washed out here, so we just enabled quite a bit of contrast with that particular tab. Go into the film compression. And this is really where you can get your white and your black point set pretty well. Between this and the expand tab. So sliding these around, obviously some of them do a lot more damage or a lot more than others. But if you look down at the curves, you can see things are moving ever so slightly. That looks pretty good. And then obviously if you go extreme, you can really, but the black point's already pretty set. Turn it on. There we go. Okay, so this is a great example. Okay, so you can see this blue creeping in. That is the monitor that we have turned on. So that is telling me that I'm pulling the black point up way too much and we're underexposing that. So if I go and turn the monitor off, you'll see that it's really underexposed right there. So if I then pull the black point down and lift those shadows again, we're back, and then that clipping should be almost gone. We're down here in these dark shadows, so we can lift that up some more. But that's where that monitor functionality really comes in handy. Lift the white point up, which is just a little bit more exposure. And then print is pretty fun. This is obviously exactly what it means. So if you look at this and you drop this menu down, this is actually the print, what kind of print it would be coming out of when you're printing the film. So these are the different printers that you could run film through. I found that this in Kodak Endura glossy paper is my favorite out of it. So I'll turn that on. And again, we just dropped the shadows. So I'm going to lift the black point up again. But I found, let's turn this off. I found that that one is my favorite. So we added quite a bit of contrast back in there. And then you can obviously push the exposure inside of there. But I think that one's my favorite. I'll show you the other ones. That one's pretty overexposed. That's the other Kodak. This is the Fujifilm, which gets really green. And then the Cineon gets really washed out, which we could go back and add more contrast, but I'm not going to. Okay, so color head. So this is pretty fun. You can get really crazy inside of here. So in here, you've got yellow, blue, magenta, green, cyan, red, and you can control these individually. So we can go and push these and it gets pretty wild, pretty fast if you move too many of these too fast. So what you can do though is you can gang these together and you can ever so slightly push and pull these, and it makes a really nice look. And then you can warm and cool your shadow tones with these sliders. So this is obviously cooling down the shadows. Here's the midtones going cool or warm. And this is sort of how you can get that kind of teal and orange in your shadows and highlights. And it's so subtle, but you can really kind of craft your look with this color head tab. And that all those tabs together are really the color side of Dehancer and really developing the look. And that's really how you would develop the look. Now, if you want to add more nodes to really push and pull your color and really develop a style, of course you can. But for the most part, that's where you're going to do all of the pushing and pulling. And then, of course, changing your film stock and then doing that again, you can get a million different combinations. So if we keep going down, next is film grain. Now, film grain is exactly what it says. In here, there's a bunch of different versions. You can go custom and you can actually build in and dial in your own custom, which I do not recommend because it's crazy and you could spend forever just trying to dial it in. I find that if you just pick one of these presets and then just kind of dial it back how you need, works really well. And the rule of thumb here is the smaller the film stock, the bigger the grain. So I'll show you. So also the smaller the ISO, the smaller the ISO, also the bigger the grain. So if I go to 8mm, we'll zoom in here, you'll see that 8mm at 50 ISO, and we'll enable it. The grain is pretty chunky. If I compare that to 16mm 50 ISO, it gets quite a bit smaller, and then 35 it starts to shrink, and then 65 at 50 the grain gets a lot smaller, and that's because the grain size on the larger film stock just gets smaller by it gets smaller on the bigger film stock. And then of course you can go crazy by adding however the amount is. I find that like around 10 to like 11 is good. And then I usually try to go higher ISO because lower ISO, because the lower ISO is a little bit less. And then you can turn it off. Now, I shot this music video on a really old lens, so there's already quite a bit of character inside of the look of the shot. So it's not actually grain, but there's quite a bit of character, and I had a mist or a diffusion filter, so there's quite a bit of diffusion already on the lens coming through the digital sensor. So I didn't really need that much grain to begin with. But you can see if you add just a little bit, it adds a touch and it helps it look a little bit better. But I will say when you add film grain, when you start to add film grain and the other effects that we'll go over here in a second, it starts to slow your processing down, so your computer will get a little bit slower. All right, so we'll throw the film grain back on and we'll go to the next one, which is halation, which is the thing that everybody loves. So same thing, the smaller the film stock, the more halation you're gonna get. So we'll turn it on first, and I will go, again, you can do this custom, but I would recommend you don't. We'll go to 8mm, and you can already see just by turning that on that there's a ton of halation, which is this red glow that's happening everywhere. And if I just dial that back, you can start to see it come down a little bit, but it's crazy. So I'm gonna go to 35mm halation. Hopefully we'll see some normal. It's pretty bright out this day, so it's really kind of hard to see, but let's see if I can find a good spot. You can see it kind of around this edge. Usually you see it around edges. Near light, you can kind of see it around his pants. I dial it up, turn the grain off, see if we can see it better. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see, but anyway, just be careful with the halation. I just recommend if you're gonna do it, just do it light. You don't need a lot. It's a cool effect, but just like anything else, when you overdo it, it just looks cheesy and looks bad, and it just looks like you're trying to do it too much. I don't usually do the bloom because I usually shoot with a diffusion filter. So again, you can overdo the bloom. We'll throw it on and you'll start to see it's already blooming quite a bit. But again, if you look at this spot on his head, on his helmet here. I shot with a diffusion filter, so it's already pretty soft anywhere there's harsh light, but I'll throw the bloom on and you'll see if we crank this up, you'll see that kind of ghosting. Again, if you don't shoot with a diffusion filter, this is great and it helps soften things. Just don't overdo it. Keep it soft, keep it light, and same rule of thumb, the smaller the film stock, the more it's going to bloom. So if we go 8mm, you can see it's really blooming. So I usually, and all these effects, by the way, I usually use in the 65mm setting if I use them, because I like the bigger film stock look. I like when it's a little bit more, less noticeable, I should say. All right, film damage. I don't ever use this. This to me is probably one of the cheesier. These next things are the cheesiest effects out of all of them to me. I'll enable this. This is, if I remember correctly, because I don't even really use it, film damage. Let's see. Yeah, so if you see, okay, there we go. This is actually film, exactly what it says. So you can see it, it's film damage. So this is just scratches, fuzz, hair, just different pieces of imperfections on film that have randomly been scanned in and put into this effect. Again, I never use this. I'm not a big fan of it. I think it looks pretty cheesy. Maybe it's cool for like one clip if you're doing like a, you know, I don't know, you need to insert something on an old TV and you need to just randomly put it on a clip. Maybe it looks cool. I don't know. Not a fan, but it's there if you need it. You can also add jitter to it. It's going to slow down your processor when you're trying to render and play back. So just keep that in mind. I'll turn that off. Not a fan. All right, film breath. So this is another one that I don't really use. This emulates film shake. I'm not going to show you because it's processor intensive, but again, it just emulates film going through a film gate, so that these next two, I believe FilmWeave does the same thing or similar, where it just basically emulates film moving, film moving through the film gate and through a camera. So it's gonna move and breathe and kind of like shake like film would when it's actually going through a film camera. So again, not a fan. Overscan, same thing. This is going to be probably has to be the cheesiest one out of all of them. So if I enable this, there you go. This was what I was talking about, that Super 8 clip. So if you wanted to put this on here, and if we go to film overscan, now you can make it look like a Super 8 film. And if you play it back, makes it look like it's rolling like a Super 8 clip. The one thing it's missing is it doesn't really stutter like a Super 8 film. So Super 8 film drops frames and kind of feels like it's stuttering and missing film. So it's, again, these things are there if you want to use them, and there's different versions of it. So you can play around with this. And then output. So this is basically 0 to 1. So this is a mix. So 0 being we're turning the plugin all the way off. So we're back to log. 100% is all the way on. So if you had some other nodes and you wanted to mix this, you could. And then this is cool. This is a LUT generator. So I could actually save this out as a LUT, and then I could use it as a LUT moving forward. And then just drop it in on any other red clip that I want, and it'll be all these presets built into a LUT. All right, so that's Dehancer pretty much in a nutshell. I will show you one other clip from an iPhone, and I wanted to show you how easy it is to match these. So I'm gonna go back, drop my reset node on here, and show you the power of Dehancer when you're using it on a different camera. So it's not just for big camera. So we'll go Apple log. So right off the bat, just picking the Apple log profile, it's looking pretty decent. But I noticed that if you pick the Filmic Pro V3 10-bit, it actually looks a lot better. So first thing I'm going to do is bump up the compensation. Now, one thing I did notice is I had to use the monitor clipping indicator on the iPhone footage a lot more because it's a lot easier to clip than something like a Red camera. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, so we'll go through, we'll just do some quick tweaks on this and see if we can get something kind of decent looking. I noticed that Kodak Gold looked pretty good on the iPhone. Turn that on. So yeah, that looks pretty good. We'll do some color boosting. So you can see right here that the iPhone footage is way more susceptible to clipping quickly. It doesn't have the latitude, obviously, that the Red footage has. But just right there, right off the bat, it already looks pretty good. And what I'm going to do is skip all of this, turn this on, I think. Give it a little warmth. And then I think the grain and the halation in this clip looks a lot better. So we'll add the grain. So there, okay, so the grain is pretty heavy when you use 35 millimeter. So we're gonna drop it down to the 50 millimeter ISO 50, and I'm gonna drop the amount down, and that looks pretty good. So for iPhone footage, and then halation. So let's drop. So you can see this is a great example of the halation on these light posts. You can see it really glows with that red halation. So what I'm going to do is actually tone that down quite a bit. But now it looks nice. Now it's just a little subtle pop and it looks good. But I think that's pretty good. And that would be totally usable. Obviously, I'd want to go in and stylize it a lot more, but this is totally usable in a sequence. All right, guys. And the last thing I'm going to go over here is really that you can use Dehancer to help match cameras pretty well. That's one of the hard things that I found in my journey of color grading and just working with different cameras, different teams, different footage, things like that. You know, sometimes you just need to grab footage with your iPhone because you don't have any other choice. And in fact, that's what happened on this particular music video. So we're back here in that one clip where I shot the music video. This was obviously the Red Komodo X. This node tree is my normal node tree that I would use to color grade most of my projects. I'm not going to go into all the nodes here. There's a lot going on here, so I'm not really going to dive into what everything is going on here. But right here is the Dehancer node, and I'll turn it off, turn it on, so you can see that that's the main thing that's working in this particular tree. If you look at this next clip here, you can see that these two clips match really well together, and that's because they're pretty much graded almost identically. I didn't really have to do a whole lot of work to match those, but that's because they're also shot with the same camera. So this was also shot with the Red Komodo X. But this shot right here was not. This was shot with my iPhone, and that's because we were not allowed to bring the large camera rig up into the Ferris wheel on the Santa Monica Pier. So I had to bring only the camera I was allowed, which was my iPhone. But I wanted to show you that even though this node tree here only has 4 nodes on it, I was able to quickly just match pretty close to identical, at least quick enough, because this shot is really fast inside of the cut. It's close enough to where it blends in with all of the other shots. So if you see Dehancer here loaded up on this last node, I'll turn that off and you can see this is the iPhone footage. Now, one thing I do want to note is if you look at the color profile or the source, I actually ended up choosing a Red camera as my source. I ended up going with the Gemini 5K and the Red color profile. Don't ask me why. For whatever reason, that's what ended up working best. That's what looked best. And then with a couple nodes tweaking just a few things. So this HDR node, which says balance and exposure, brings down the sky and a lot of the highlights in the shot. This saturation brings down boosts up the sky to make it blue. And then this warper gives us a little bit of contrast back into these yellows and some of the blue. And then the Dehancer node does the rest. And that includes like the film grain and any of the other effects. So between these 4 nodes, I was able to really achieve everything that I have going on with this with this node tree. So that just shows you that Dehancer is pretty powerful on its own, and you don't really need to have matching cameras to get matching looks. You can actually match pretty closely with multiple different cameras. So I just wanted to show you guys that. All right, let's wrap it up. All right, guys, so that's the brief overview of Dehancer. Obviously, you could spend the rest of time pushing and pulling the levers and buttons inside of Dehancer, getting different looks. If there was a favorite film emulation that I went over that you look, please let me know in the comments below. And if you end up getting it, don't forget to use the code below, Nerdy Camera, to get 10% off. I would love to see what you come up with. Please send me samples and examples if you do end up getting it. And I would also love to know what your favorite film emulation is if you end up trying it out. That's going to do it for me today, guys. Hit the like button if you like this video. Make sure you share it. And if you like the channel's growing. Please hit subscribe. I'd so appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.